Alright, we are recording of their military discipline, which I even put into my notes at the end, that one thing, unless it's in the final chapter of the religions of the Utopians, does seem my memory was incorrect. Kind of. Not completely. Certainly agrees with the sentiment, but it is not so much that they will, when they desire war, will just pit people against each other. It's actually another thing, but I'm not sure if they even have a statement in there about when the Utopians decide to go to war. Well, a little bit. Yeah. Let's get to it. So we get this, which is an apparent contradiction with what was written before. They accustom themselves daily to military exercises and the discipline of war, in which not only their men, but their women likewise are trained up, that, in case of necessity, they may not be quite useless. Except that earlier, when it was given when the description was given as far as their daily schedules, it was said 6 hours of work, 8 hours to sleep, the rest their own discretion. Now, technically, it could be but their own discretion was whatever the state actually approved of. So maybe it was we approve this, but it still is no, you didn't actually say that they ever trained for any kind of military use. I'm not sure. I might be hearing a siren, and so I'm not sure if it would be coming through the mic. But it should, if it is, well, I do have a noise reduction going, so hopefully that's not. But anyway, so yeah, this is an apparent there have been storms in the area. If that siren is going, that's what it is. But yeah, so we do have this apparent contradiction that it was never described before that this was a thing. And yes, and they're women. So that you get some stuff later on where, again, you get contradictions, like, within the same paragraph, but we'll get to that. This they think to be not only just... Oh, yeah, for the explanation of why they would go to war. And different reasons for it. Including that, basically saying that, yes, they will... Well, they indeed help their friends, not only in defensive but also in offensive wars, but they never do that unless they had been consulted before the breach was made. Basically, it's saying that they will go to war when it is an offensive war. They will help their friends. But it is we need to make certain that you've tried everything else first, which, that sounds nice, but at the same time, sometimes, it's like if somebody's kind of like, well, why don't you try this? Why don't you try this? Why don't you try that? That's not helping things. That may actually be making it worse. Just, certain reality of human nature and international affairs. Anyway, they think to be not only just when one neighbor makes an inroad on another by public order and carries away the spoils. So basically when somebody does do violence in that way. But when the merchants of one country are oppressed in another, either under pretense of some unjust laws or by the perverse wresting of good ones. So, this is interesting because it does mean they will go to military war in response to economic actions, which, modern day, would be considered unreasonable. Back then, I guess it would not be so unreasonable, or this is more just being satirical and trying to mock somebody who did that. That siren, I must be hearing something else, because that siren typically doesn't go that long. But yeah. It is definitely a curious idea, but it is also very possible that at this time, those merchants, well, for one thing, the merchants would be basically, it is possible those merchants are the only ones that are really going out to the other nations, for whatever nation this is, not necessarily Utopia, which means then that they are, in effect, ambassadors. So an abuse of them can be seen as a great abuse of the home nation of that merchant. So I can see that. And also, just depending, it might be hey, trade is very important, and if you start abusing the means of that trade, you are potentially assaulting that nation. Like if Utopia seems to describe that their main export is corn. And they need to import iron. So in theory, if Utopia's merchants were being abused when they were trying to acquire iron, it's like, hey, we need that, so they'll go to war because they need to get it from somewhere. And yeah. So I could see that making some sense. Might be rain. But yeah. Okay. So we get this as well, which, I mean, on the one hand, it makes sense, but on the other hand, because of how this is presented and how Utopia has been described thus far, this is likely just showing naivete. So I want to talk about it. They would be both troubled and ashamed of a bloody victory over their enemies, and think it would be a foolish purchase as to buy the most valuable goods at too high a rate. And in no victory do they glory so much as in that which is gained by dexterity and a good conduct without bloodshed. In such cases they appoint public triumphs and erect trophies to the honor of those who have succeeded. For then do they reckon that a man acts suitably to his nature when he conquers his enemy in such a way as that no other creature but a man could be capable of, and that is by the strength of his understanding. So, I mean, don't get me wrong. It makes perfect sense that you do want to try to achieve victory with as little lives, as little harm done as is needed, as is possible, I guess would technically be the correct grammar there. I get that, especially because that also can be a demonstration of the victor's skills to achieve that. However, this is Utopia, so I don't really trust that, and especially how this is described, and it's also an aspect of, okay, like, I don't remember which American Indian tribe had the Kandiku, something like that, where the idea was, if you could get to your enemy and touch them with your weapon, not hurt them, but just like, if you had your bow, if you could touch them with it, that was considered as great a defeat as if you had killed them. Because it demonstrated that you were so skillful, you could get to them and choose to spare their life. So it was a great dishonor to the enemy as well. That makes sense when both cultures have that concept. Utopia is so different from every other nation, from every other culture, as it's been described, that them thinking, oh, we've defeated them, cool, we don't need to kill them all, we don't need to do all that. It's like, we've done... That's not actually going to secure your victory, because you don't know that they see it as a full defeat. They might be like, all right, well, we'll just, get together and, come back and kill you tomorrow. I mean, it is naive. Just want to check, was there anything else in there? Yeah, there's also the aspect that I put in here. I don't know at this time how much guerrilla warfare would have mattered as well. Because that can definitely be but, we defeated you. It's like, well, yeah, that day. And then we just started doing other things to defeat you and just made sure we weren't regular about it. And when you think about it, I know that the American Revolutionary War we used guerrilla tactics. We were not regular in various ways, and that's partly what helped us win. But you also do see it in much more modern conflicts, including modern conflicts today, that by people just basically being scrappy and refusing to be defeated, and then finding ways to make the most use of limited resources, they can hang in there and, in fact, start gaining successes that they should not normally. You would never predict that. Now, true, as I said, I don't know how much guerrilla warfare was a thing back then, but it would... Not that they get into the method of warfare here, but it is if you do not incapacitate your enemy, either by death or some other means, either by bloodshed or not, you are potentially keeping yourself in danger of their defeating you. So, yeah, and that is something that Utopia seems to just not understand. The only design of the Utopians in war is to obtain that by force, which, if it had been granted them in time, would have prevented the war. So basically, if they wanted something, it's like, well, you're refusing to give it to them, and so they go to war. It's like, okay, once they achieve that, then they're done. I mean, kind of it makes sense, but at the same time, if you only go, it goes back to the whole, does the enemy know that they are defeated once you achieve that? Because it might be you've been giving us bloody noses, we got to give you some back kind of thing. Where it's like, no, that's not enough. We're just going to keep coming at you. It's like, okay, fine, you can take that. We're going to prepare, and then we're going to come and defeat you. I mean, it's... Yeah. Or if that cannot be done, to take so severe revenge on those that have injured them, that they must be terrified for doing the like for the time to come. So basically what I was just describing is, if they only go so far as to take what they want and then leave, who they took it from might be like, oh yeah, sure, we're at peace, but then are preparing to get that very revenge. This is interesting. They do some psychological warfare that, in some ways, I get it. In some ways, it makes sense to do and may work, but in other ways, it may actually be very dangerous and cause more problems. And it's important to remember that Utopia, despite them being a slave state, they also believe themselves superior. Okay. As soon as they declare war, they take care to have a great many schedules, bounties, that are sealed with their common seal, affixed in the most conspicuous places of their enemy's country. This is carried secretly and done in many places all at once. In these they promise great rewards to such as shall kill the prince. So it's basically they are putting bounties on their head of their primary enemy, but also lesser leaders, because, hey, if you can kill them, or and they double the sum to them that instead of killing the person so marked out, shall take them alive and put them in their hands. So to them they see it as, and to be fair, yes, this is absolutely a thing that would have been present then. I'm not sure how necessarily present it is today, where if you do take out the leader, then those under them will scatter because they've lost their leader, they don't necessarily know what to do. But the assumption here is also that, and it very much goes through this, that, well, here, where does it even say? As knowing that the greater part of them, their enemy, do not engage in war of their own accord, but are driven into it by the passions of their prince. So basically they are saying that, well, their assumption is that their enemy doesn't actually want to fight them. That's not necessarily true. And even by this time, there would have been a few wars by this point that I'm aware of, European relevant wars at least, that the people wanted to go to war. It wasn't just a single leader. So this would not work against that coherent enemy. Cohesive, it might be a better word than coherent, but I mean, coherent kind of works. And there's also, why couldn't that be done against them? Why is the assumption here that Utopia is always cohesive in wanting to go to war as well? So that there are issues with that. If this method does not succeed with them, then they sow seeds of contention among their enemies and animate the prince's brother or some of the nobility to aspire to the crown. If they cannot disunite them by domestic broils, then they engage their neighbors against them and make them set on foot some old pretensions, which are never wanting to princes when they have occasion for them. These they plentifully supply with money, though but very sparingly with any auxiliary troops. For they are so tender of their own people that they would not willingly exchange one of them with the princes of their enemy's country. Okay, so this I think is, and I will put in here. I mean, it's but kind of how they try to incite princes' brothers. Okay. This, I think, is where my memory comes from, that they would, when they have two nations that are at war, they would try to incite, oh, we don't like them, okay, we'll strengthen this one against. I think that's where it's coming from, and there's also how they hire as well, that it's like, my memory for that is apparently wrong, but it's not completely incorrect. It was an amalgamation of multiple things here, but then maybe it's going to come in the next chapter too. I don't know. because these things do kind of go everywhere. But yeah, because this is all right, then we're just going to strengthen a political rival of yours. So if there's a prince here, they're brothers. So somebody who have an equal claim to the throne, assuming that it is through royalty. The nobles, okay, yeah, then it's just, other political leaders there. And also even their neighbors against them. Because it's like, hey, somebody's going to have some old claim where it's like, that should be our land. And do that. And then they, it mentions here that they supply them with money. Yeah, as well, to try to, strengthen them. And, yeah. But are very sparing with the troops, meaning, yeah, we're not going to send you many of our people because we value our people more than even the princes of your country. Yeah. We then get to more description of that with the Zapolets, who live 500 miles east of Utopia. They are a rude, wild, and fierce nation, who delight in the woods and rocks among which they are born and bred up. And basically describes how, yeah, these are people that are clearly intended, like their nature is conflict and war. And they will also basically be mercenaries for anyone. You pay them, they will, doesn't matter, they are completely loyal to you, at least for that day. The next day, if their former enemy pays them more, then, well, they're fighting on that side. And back and forth. Yeah, they serve those that hire them, both with much courage and great fidelity, but will not engage to serve for any determined time, and agree upon such terms that the next day they may go over to the enemies of those whom they serve if they offer them a greater encouragement. So entirely does their avarice influence them, and yet this money, which they value so highly, is of little use to them. For what they purchase thus with their blood, they quickly waste on luxury, which among them is but of a poor and miserable form. So it's, Utopia looks down on these people, does see it as that, oh yeah, they do so much to gain this money, but then they just waste it by Utopia's standards, though. But we also get this. The Utopians are not all troubled how many of these happen to be killed, and reckon it a service done to mankind if they could be a means to deliver the world from such a lewd and vicious sort of people. Utopia is a horrible place. Because basically because let's be real, what they're even describing there, I'm not even going to believe is true. I'm not going to believe that the Zapolets are actually like that. I feel more like that's polemic. It's like, yeah, we just don't like them. Utopians are racist towards them. It's like, yeah. So it's like, sure, we got money, we'll just pay them, so they will fight and they'll die. And it's like, cool. I mean, you win, that betters us. You die, that betters the world. So it's all good. Utopia is a horrible place. Okay. Yeah, we get this. As they force no man to go into any foreign war against their will. So it is explaining that they don't necessarily want to send their own men to fight in war. But if any want to go, they may. And it even describes that they will sometimes send three that, the one at the top will, basically three generals. The first one, and then if that one dies, second one, then that one dies, the third. And it's like, oh yeah, and this protects against everything. Well, not if, the first two die, and, the third is now like, I'm the last one. I mean, I guess, send a letter back and be like, hey, can I get two more guys? Because assuming that they're not all killed too rapidly. But anyway, as they force no man to go into foreign war against his will, so they do not hinder those women who are willing to go along with their husbands. Okay, so, it's like, the husband has to go so many hundreds of miles away. Yeah, he brings his wife with him. That's reasonable, right? On the contrary, they encourage and praise them. Yeah, stand by your man. That's a good idea. And they stand often next to their husbands in the front of the army. Wait, what? They also place together those who are related, parents and children, kindred, and those that are mutually allied near one another. So, yeah, they encourage the whole family to go and stand together at the front of the line, so they can all attack and die together. Gets better. It is a matter of great reproach. So this is a negative thing. The culture doesn't like that. if husband or wife survive one another. Great, you are now a widow or widower, and hey, what the hell's wrong with you? You should have died with them. Or if a child survives his parents. Isn't that the idea? You want the child to survive the parent? Now, true, if the parent's death is violence and war, it's like, okay, that sucks. It's before their time. But it still is. A child is supposed to survive their parent. Right? A parent is not supposed to bury their child. It's supposed to be the other way around. But here, no, it's reproachful. You shouldn't have done that. And it does explain it's, so that therefore they come to be engaged in action. They continue to fight to the last man. It's like, what if they won and it's just a, hey, there was a lucky shot and you lost somebody. What the hell? They use all prudent methods to avoid the endangering their own men, and if it is possible, let all the action and danger fall upon the troops that they hire. So if it becomes necessary for themselves to engage, they then charge with such courage as they avoided it before with prudence. So basically, even though it was saying earlier that, oh yeah, we hate cowards, and we'll try to arrange things so that a coward would be in a situation, if war comes, that they cannot escape, and so in necessity find courage. But here it's like, yeah, we actively try to not go into war when we're in war. You try to not go into the battle, and it's like, hey, everyone else, you die first, then I'll get involved. It's like, but I do also wonder a little bit. I didn't put it in my notes. Maybe I should. But I do wonder a little bit if this whole, hey, have your whole family together on the front lines, and it's a bad thing if if only some of you die. It's bad. I wonder if some of that is coming off of the Zappalettes, who love war. This family is somebody who they chose to go. If it is a, hey, we're getting rid of them as well, because this is a lowly base thing. This conflict, I think I will add it to here, to my notes. Wonder if this follows from the Zappalette treatment that Utopia wants the family that is willing to go to war to be killed, because they see this as so beneath their ideals. I think that's not unreasonable. That they see it as way too, just as they want the Zappalettes culled from humanity, they want these people culled from their own citizens, from their own population. Yeah, and then there's also this that is a contradiction with what we just said. It's like, hey, you survived your parents? Shame on you. Shame. Because that's what reproach means, okay? That is the meaning of the certainty that, well, it's talking about how once they do have to charge, that they will be even more courageous, because the certainty that their children will be well looked after when they are dead frees them from all that anxiety concerning them, with which often masters men of great courage. Your child will be shamed if you die before them in this war. They will be treated with dishonor and disrespect. But hey, you can go ahead and die in this war. Fight so strongly, because, when you die, they're still going to be safe and well taken care of. It's like, why would they be well taken care of? They're going to be reproached for their survival and your death. But here it's like, no, they'll be well taken. No, they won't. We do get some description of their arms and armament. That I'm just going to read one part of, because basically sort of it's just stated, oh yeah, they got great stuff. It's like, there's no explanation to this, which, to be fair, Moore is not necessarily an expert in that, and so couldn't write it to be at that level, but it still is. It's basically the exposition dump that's like, okay, but why? It just continues this whole, oh yeah, they're just great, they're just wonderful, and they're better than everyone. It's like, okay, that doesn't help anything. It's like, prove it. The whole actions, not words kind of thing. Their armor is very strong for defense, and yet not so heavy as to make them uneasy in their marches. They can even swim with it. Which, yeah, that would be a great achievement. But it is still just it's just said. Then talks about, they're great with the bows. That they use pole axes as well to, kill their enemies. Nice, heavy, sharp pole axes. They use horses, so they have a cavalry. And also they have, war machines that are in part designed so that they can be easily moved about and disassembled and reassembled. It's like, do you not understand what a war machine is? it's like if you look, I do actually think that is a fair representation of them. The towers in The Return of the King that the orcs push up, and that the orcs push up in the Battle of the Pelennor Fields to reach the top of the walls of Minas Tirith. Those were real. Actually, no, I'll take that back. They're not real in that actual war towers of this era, of the era of Utopia, would actually have been more advanced than what you see in Return of the King. Okay, because there would be some that would have multiple levels so that you could have, because in Return of the King, I'm pretty sure it is basically, they just maybe have a spot where there can be archers shooting down, but it's mainly about just getting troops there. I'm pretty sure they also had some where, no, they would also have a level where they could drop boiling oil onto the walls and such. It's like they were very involved. Maybe not boiling oil, but they would try to throw fire from there on there. So you'd need that up higher than just at the level of the walls. These are complex things, and they're like, no. How does it actually? I know it's at the end one. They're very good at finding out warlike machines and disguise them so well that the enemy does not perceive them till he feels the use of them. War towers, you're not hiding those things. So that he cannot prepare such defense as would render them useless. The chief consideration had in the making them is that they be easily carried and managed. Again, that's not for a siege, certainly not any siege engine. There's no way you're managing that, okay? Because those, they'd always be bespoke. It's like, hey, we got to do this quick. Chop down some trees, or use what we got and build the thing. I do think I'm not sure necessarily where it would come from, but in Return of the King, they do show that they have metal on the front as armor for those war towers. Yes, absolutely, you would try to armor them. You could also do that with things that weren't metal, but it's reasonable that maybe you were bringing sheets of metal like that. Maybe you're using shields that either were from fallen comrades, compadres, I was going to say, I don't know why, or fallen enemies, something like that would build that. Plus, in theory, you could also be using leathers. Leather is surprisingly resilient, and when it's you're putting that over wood, that's still going to be helpful. And I could even believe that it would help with stopping, because leather doesn't really want to burn, so I could believe they would help with stopping, trying to catch the thing on fire as well. But anyway, there's also this. This is the last point, then it ends. They send some of their own people. Okay, so they win the war. Basically, there's no discussion of them losing, by the way. It does mention that, if Utopia itself is attacked, then they won't use foreign auxiliaries. They won't be like, hey, come here and help. No, they will fight themselves, but yeah. Whatever, that's not too surprising. But so they win the war, and they make the defeated enemies, pay them for the cost of what they did. Of what was expended to go to war, which makes sense. But if you know the history of World War One and rather precursor of World War II, that's a good way to actually see another war happen. But anyhow, so they would get all this money, and in some of it be a constant revenue. They send some of their own people to receive these revenues, who have orders to live magnificently and like princes, by which means they consume much of it upon the place. I find this rather contradictory. And right now I'm just checking how long is the... Alright. Of the Religions of Utopia is about 18 pages long. That's not horrible. That's not horrible. But anyway, so Yeah, it's like, oh no, live like princes, live it up, do all that. But they don't value gold, they don't value pearls. They see all of these things as meaningless, and they were mocking the ambassadors that came dressed like these same princes. So it's like, wait, so you do understand the value of these, at least in other cultures. Why are you... So why would you mock them when that culture comes visiting? It's kind of going back to that whole Utopia in many ways is demonstrating inversions. But a problem is when you have that inversion, now it creates a contradiction because if you're inverted in one place but not another, falls apart. So yeah, it's... I'm just trying to remember. I feel like I had a better example in another chapter, and it's just not coming to me right now. For what one example of that is where they had an inversion one, but not... Where they applied the inversion here, but then when you looked at it here, nope, it was like everyone else. That doesn't go together. Alright, yeah, so just the one chapter left of the religions of the Utopians, which... I don't know what to expect from here. I honestly don't remember it. But it's also, it's like the last one of their slaves and their marriages, and then more than half of that chapter is actually talking about their international politics. I have no idea. This might be, oh yeah, they got this religion, that religion. Now, let me tell you about their food. So we'll see how that goes. I do think that there is a wrap-up at the end, though, as well. Like, Raphael's finished telling all this. Then, like, oh, okay, that's interesting. Will we see you tomorrow to ask you some questions? Like, oh, yeah, sure. I think there is something like that at the end. I don't remember what it is, but I think it does exist. I don't really know what exactly to say to help try and wrap this up, aside from, what I said earlier. This is still an evil people, right? They basically only value their own lives. They will hire people because, hey, you're good at this stuff, okay? You are good at warfare. But you're just, you live like animals, according to the Utopians. It's like, yeah, they look down on them, so it's like, hey, they can either die in war, which betters humanity, or they can live and achieve victory that we want them to that we want that victory, so that betters us. I get that, but it's still an incredibly cold and degrading mindset that they have about these other people. And I do think that does expose just how, yeah, they're not good. Utopia is not a good place. They are not of good morals. And plus, the whole, hey, pleasure is the most important thing. They're living a pleasurable life. It works for them. Why are you saying that's wrong? See, that's also one of the issues there about when you have that kind of morality, is because pleasure is already itself a relative concept, a subjective concept. What I find pleasurable is not what you find pleasurable, and same thing, you find something pleasurable that I do not. But if all my goal is pleasure, then you achieving it by another means, I cannot judge. I cannot say that is wrong, no matter what it is, even if it is something that is obviously evil. It's like, even if it is something objectively evil, because I've surrendered objectivity to the subjectivity of relativity. So that's clear moral codes give you rule of law versus rule of man, which is all subjective. So going back to that, yeah, that was just the last chapter, wasn't it? Where they also talked about how they manage, how their courts work. Where it's like, oh yeah, sure, we'll just, there's no advisement as to how to sentence people, and, when they are sentenced, typically we just sentence them to slavery. It's like, the hell? And I do feel like adding, I thought of it before, but I didn't mention it in that video, that I do know that there are those that would say that, the current prison system in America is akin to making them slaves, and indeed there is technically a partial carve-out in the Constitution that, in one of the amendments, I don't remember which, about how, yeah, there are certain treatments that you would never, there are certain things you would never subject a normal citizen to, but a convicted prisoner you would. It's, I don't remember exactly where it is or what it is, but there is something in there that is like that acknowledges that, hey, you can treat them worse. But it still is except for the most serious of crimes, like, even if you want to say, oh, that makes them slaves, even if you want to argue that, it's still the case that except for the most serious of crimes, there's an end. Okay, there's an end to their sentence. Utopia doesn't have that. There's no description at all of their terms of slavery ending earlier than just the prince deciding, hey, we're going to parole you. We're going to give you a reprieve. I'm going to pardon you. Aside from that, there was no stated end for them. So that is far worse. And when you also consider the whole, hey, you can do whatever you want. It's your time. You have your discretion there, except you have to do things that we approve of. It's already a slave state. So, yeah, it's a horrible place. It's just, what level of slave are you? All right. Of the religions of the Utopians next, this should also prove interesting because, as I noted previously in one of the chapters, Utopia goes back 1700 something years, but Utopia itself was written in 1516, which means it would predate Christianity. So that should prove interesting. We'll see. All right. See you next time.